you very much, all of you, for joining us. As you know, we are doing a masterclass about sustainability and the roadmap to meet the industry systematic challenges that we face as an industry. I'm presenting a Maribel Esparcia Perez from the European Sustainable Hospitality Club, and I am presenting in this amazing, beautiful framework of Women in Hospitality and Travel Tech Group, which is an amazing group that if you want to join us, please do so. I believe that we are also on LinkedIn, so please feel free to do any questions you've got, or to, at the end of my presentation, I'll give between 10 and 15 minutes so we can go through all the questions that you may have. The timing will be now 5 minutes past 12. We will start the presentation. Between 5 minutes past 12 and 12:50, I'll be talking about all the content I've prepared for you. And then I'd like to leave a space between 10 and 15 minutes for you to have, if you have any specific questions about your own business, if you'd like to start an initiative within sustainability and you don't know where to start, or you already know but you want some further advice in any specific area. So please feel free to ask me later on in the comments, whether it's on LinkedIn or here in the live. So please feel free to do so. And the main takeaway I'd like you to have when we finish the content is that you are able to recognize international environmental and social challenges that we have in the travel and leisure industry, and how we can take action, because we have resources to take action and mitigate them. So let's get started. We will be talking about three main areas here. So the main systematic challenges that I'll be talking about that affect our businesses, they can affect directly or indirectly. In the first place, sustainability megaforces. I'll be talking about what are they and how can we be better prepared for them when they come. And here we have two problems. That one is the likelihood of happening, and the other area is what is the impact. So both main areas are likelihood and impact that have in our businesses, and how do we prepare for them. And on the second main area, we're talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, of course, and environmental, social, and governance risks, and how they interconnect, or where they link, and of course how we can face them in our industry. But we need to understand that the Sustainable Development Goals cannot be mitigated or addressed in by our managers, or CSR managers, or sustainability managers. We have to work with private-public partnerships, NGOs, communities, and all the business stakeholders. So I'll be talking about that as well. And thirdly, supply chain considerations, procurement, and everything related to the business supply chain. So I'd like to start framing what ethics, how we see ethics since the 70s, and of course, how is the progress and where are we at the moment. We started with the main asking ourselves whether shareholder primacy should be still around in our days, and shareholder versus stakeholders approach that we have Friedman and many others that I'd link some studies or scientific papers if any of you want to go in detail, and you can learn more about that. So how we start considering ethics in businesses, why we started talking about ethics, and workers' rights, for instance, one of the main movements, prevention in industries, in factories, and how we transition to corporate social responsibility, and late 99s with the Global Reporting Initiative, or how we started in early 2000s to understand that corporate social responsibility was something we had to take care of in businesses. Then we see nowadays that sustainable development goals are like the way to go, but we forget that the millennial development goals were earlier, and they were presented by United Nations in 2000, and 198 states signed, if I'm right, all of them signed an agreement, and they were main millennial development goals that were tackling poverty, and it was kind of the sustainable development goals, but at their initial movement. Now the SDGs, that is the agenda for 2030, of course, is more advanced, and now we see these 17 different goals that we'd like to meet for 2030, which is a lot of work to do here. But in our industry, we have a long way to go. Then we started to see movements in academics and industry leaders, universities, and some professionals within the industry talking about purpose and how we integrate purpose in our businesses, and how we can have purpose-driven organizations. That is just thinking the higher purpose of our companies, thinking why the company exists, what is the story behind, and of course, who are we serving in a way? Are we helping? Are we having a positive impact? And how we can address risks. And that is my last point. So now finance is involving, since Bloomberg presented to asset managers the problems we've got in not only assets or buildings, but as well taking care of communities, and many other problems we have in our industry, such as supply chain, procurement, etc. And we've seen now more action within the finance, I would say finance, green finance, I would say, or risk assessment, more insurance companies involved, putting environmental, social, and governance risks up front to any business investment. I'll go through on detail about that later on, but it's more about the investment. It's more about where we put our money. We need to take care of environmental, social, and governance aspects of it. And of course, the areas to consider are social and human capital issues that we will see, workforce problems and challenges that we have, such as, for instance, one example here could be how I can hire more people from this local community so I can have a higher impact, and every like revenue that is generated in our business, how can this impact in a positive way to local communities? This can be an example. Also, natural capital, of course, we will see our dependency on nature, natural resources, land, water, biodiversity, wildlife, like all of the main dependencies that we've got in our industry. And lastly, cooperation. So how we can cooperate between businesses and government, and regional and local governmental entities with a more global level. So we will need this cooperation, especially in the current days that we're living. We really need this cooperation, because without facing those challenges or the sustainable development goals as well, if we don't face them cooperating, it's going to be hard to meet. Here are some of the major players. So if you're thinking, now I'd like to get your questions, and I'd like to see what are your business models and where are you based, and what are your own worries about that. But here are some of the major players that you can trust for starting your journey within sustainability. Of course, GSTC, Biosphere, Global Reporting Initiative, as I said, that they started in the 90s. So they've got a lot of experience in reporting and helping companies kind of being more transparent, which is key for consumers nowadays. Green Key for certifications, for property certifications, true cost for more kind of the investment side, and environmental and the International Society of Sustainability Professionals for training and development. No? This is just some of the examples. Of course, I could have 7 sprints here talking about many more, but they are some of the main players. So here, my question here is, why is it especially important in tourism that we are really responsible, or that we consume in an ethical way, or that we produce in an ethical way? Why is this important? So of course we have physical and weather challenges, which is inevitably will happen. Even though if we cut our emissions today, we will still have impacts in our businesses, directly or indirectly, as I said before. In the first place, or the first point I want to bring up is the new environment challenge operations. So of course we are seeing it now, the easy way that we can disrupt the business as usual, and we don't recognize the likelihood. I go back to my first statement. Here we have 2 main areas: the likelihood of happening and the impact of every action. They are two different areas that we have to consider. So these new likely scenarios will have an impact and will challenge our operations. How do we prepare for that? Yes, this is my question. How do we prepare for that? So we can create contingency plans, of course, for future likely scenarios. And if we know that certain areas close to the beach are going to have raised sea levels, how is this going to affect my property? And if we are going to have extreme weather events, how is this going to affect my seasonal revenue forecast? So we have to start preparing for that. Also analysis of the company operations and the likelihood of those impacts. So we have to draw, we will talk about later, but we have to draw kind of the possible scenarios and start preparing for them. Not only in the weather changes that we will see, but also in the social movements that we'll see likely happening, migrations, etc. Also, it's key to map all the countries that are involved in our operations. So here you could say, okay, I have just one office, or I am based in one region, and that's it. That's fine. But if you are dependent on suppliers that are based in other countries or in other cities, of course you have people working for you that are from other countries as well. So we need to take that into account. We also need to understand how the traveling possible issues like we're seeing currently nowadays is affecting our business operations. So if we have headquarters, but then we have offices worldwide, how is it affecting? If we have properties or assets in different countries, how do we prepare according to laws or potential policies that are being developed and potential issues in those countries, not just where we live. So we need to have a more global perspective of what's happening and preparing as well in a more global kind of a scenario and potential impacts. Also, related to that, we need to create scenarios and protocols. So for every likelihood and impact that we design that is likely to happen and is a high impact, we have to create protocols so we can prepare for these events. As I said, weather events, but it could be also social issues that we're seeing or social movements that will affect business as usual. And for me, one of the key things here is the learning and development programs for employees and leadership, frontline. Everyone should be trained and aware of the main global issues that we could be facing, how we are preparing for that. This is a key point, and we need to start doing that. Also, for the Sustainable Development Goals, when I've been asked many times, yes, but we can't do 17 goals at the same time, and every goal has a lot to do in itself or unpack. And here is all about priorities, because of course we don't have the resources nor the time to kind of go for the 17 SDGs, but there are many of them that are linked. So when we are helping for one goal, we can start the process of developing new strategies to kind of help other goals to be met. So there is a lot to unpack, but it's good that we're starting from where we are having the worst impact in society, and of course we are developing the strategies gradually. Yeah. At the moment, if you are preparing those scenarios, you will start seeing that you have some lines of action that affect your bottom line, that will affect also the your relationship with the workforce. So we can start preparing for that internally. And one example is in protocols for involuntary migrations. So when we are seeing migrations, how we can prepare as an industry for that. And last but not least, private and public partnerships. So we are seeing now a lot of cooperation with governments with this situation. So how can we learn this lesson and also start having this more close or tight relationship with public entities, so we are better prepared for all these challenges I'm talking about? Because this is not a business problem, it's a society problem, because we are dependent on nature and we are dependent on people. So we have to have that global vision. I put here a little thing like like water bottles or bamboo toothbrushes, reusable bags or steel straws are not enough. So when I'm seeing in news that yes, we have plastic-free toiletries, or this is not enough, we need to have a more global plan vision. We really need to have protocols in place and real action. So many of you have seen the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, that are the 17 United Nations Agenda for 2030. And if you are you're a property owner and you want to start tackling them, we have a global reporting initiative, as I said, that is a non-for-profit that started in the 90s, and they help you to start disclosing your impact. That is also in the process that you start assessing what is the current situation. You're also learning as well, what are your kind of priorities, what are the main areas that you have to tackle, or how you can present projects internally. And also you'll have more transparency. That is what our consumers want within the industry as well. All the guests that are coming to our properties, if we are a hotel or travel agencies who want to use our agency, or online travel agencies, any airlines, we need transparency. Yeah. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development as well assess, kind of helps giving you tools, roadmaps to kind of get through that. And it's they have a lot of free tools. So if you don't have the budget at the moment to start investing, you can always go there, and they have this starting point for you to start kind of assessing and thinking what are the strategies for your own businesses. And for the investor side, or the environmental, social, and governance risk assessments, and all related to investment, we have the principles for responsible investment as well, which kind of guides best practices within the investment and scenario, I would say. So let's go there, because every single company has initiatives, different initiatives. It doesn't have to be sustainability per se, but we need to assess in every single initiative that the company has, we need some budget, and that money needs to be used for good. Yes. So how do we ensure that investment is used in a do the good thing or do the right thing? So we have the environmental, social, and governance risk assessment that tell us. We have environmental, so we have to ask how the project improves company performance on its environmental well-being goals. We will see some examples later on. Secondly, society. So how the project improves company performance on its external society goals. So whether it's local communities and customers or potential customers. And then, of course, employees. So how the project improves company performance on its internal social goals, employee well-being. So employee well-being will, I guess, at this point, we are aware what are the best practices. But of course, we've seen some countries that are more advanced, like UK with the Modern Slavery Act, that kind of helps protect workers' rights in the sense of guaranteeing like minimum wage, hours of work, etc. And then last but not least, governance. And of course, governance is how we as a company deal with all these problems and how we as a company kind of prioritize and use resources in the right way or in a way that really improves performance, but taking in consideration all the other aspects. Maybe you have questions already, but please write them down and later on I'll go I'll answer on all of them. So environmental, social, and governance, as I said before, are directly linked with sustainable development goals. And here we can see them. So all the environmental aspects of it is the first column. All the social aspects of it is the second column. And the third column is the governance aspects. So here we can see clearly that we can, once we are starting, of course, our strategy, we can say, okay, from the environmental side, what are our priorities? For the social side as well, and how are we going to deal with that? The partnerships is very important for the governance side. So if you want to accomplish in an effective way any of these targets, you must address it in consideration or listening or creating debates or creating kind of strategies together with other entities. As I said, could be not-for-profit, could be local communities or civil society, local or regional governmental offices. So we have to create that in a more broad way, because otherwise it will be impossible to kind of meet them. And it can be overwhelming. It can be overwhelming because we have a lot of work to do. So I think the first thing we have to do is assess our current realities and then move from that. And for us, as I said, we in tourism, we are very dependent on nature and we are very dependent on people. So we really need to take that seriously. And I've seen we've seen businesses that are not addressing those problems, and this should be a priority for all of us. As I said before, you have free tools and there is resources that we can use to start thinking and looking into these areas. And for those of you that you are already working or walking the talk or starting creating these synergies and strategies within the businesses, we need to understand what are the priorities and of course adjust as things change, like current situations. So the business risks we have, and as I mentioned in my first slide, it was sustainability megaforces, or all the, I would say, emerging risks, but as well emerging opportunities that the company could undertake to have kind of a smart initiatives. We need to take all these risks or potential challenges as opportunities, and how we can translate that into new services, for instance, or how can we create new business scenarios, and therefore we can I don't know, we can of course take it in a positive way and take the most out of it, because as we improve things, we will see that other needs are that we couldn't see before are now visible, so we can tackle them as well. So here I put all the sustainability megaforces that we've got, and of course we could add more, but this is the main ones. So regulations, of course, businesses will face more regulations as we evolve in the sustainability scenario. Water scarcity, so more properties like we see in Cabo Verde. So we have many destinations that already are struggling with water scarcity, and properties, if you have assets in those areas, will be impacted, of course. Cost on resource availability, population growth, market value, society fast speed changes that sometimes we are not able to cope with as if we are SMEs. and involuntary migrations, as I said before. This is affecting big number of people moving from A to B point, and how that affects to the destination, and of course the original point of migration, and climate change and extreme weather events, as you have seen, and this is more common to see in our news and in our daily basis. The main thing here is that we don't focus our attention in climate change, and we don't focus the attention only on the green side of it, because as climate change is happening, we're having other issues with society and with the people. So we have to take into consideration all the problems: environmental, social, and internal governance. Yeah. And here in this pyramid, what I wanted to kind of set the basics is to analyze current realities, as I said before, identify stakeholders or business stakeholders and who we need to take, where do we have to take action, set actions and build an environmental management system. For building an environmental management system, you've got ISOs. You have, of course, you have the EMA, so EMAS from the European, I don't know who of you are from European Union, but you have the EMAS. Also, you can follow, as I said, you can follow different ISOs for 26,000 for more related to the SDGs. So there are free resources. If you're curious or you want to know, please ask me, because there are. You can start, as I said, you can start creating this internal environmental management system that will allow you to kind of go through all of this that we've talked before and start building systems, internal systems, so you can really tackle all the SDGs that you propose that you have to tackle. Or it will help, or it will make your life easier if you are analyzing the environmental, social, and governance risks of a specific initiative that you have in your business as well. We need to create an internal team. So I've seen here many times we have the human resources department or different HODs taking care of all these initiatives, and we really need to have either a sustainability manager. I don't like corporate social responsibility, because it's not only that, but we need to have more than the quality manager or more than the CSR manager. We really need to have, or that HR director. We really need to have an internal team that will be or is capable to do all the things we said before, set the priorities, do that influence internally so we can get things done, because that's difficult. When we're in business, it's difficult that we set the goals, and then to kind of build the systems, it takes time. The more employees you have, the worse or the hardest to kind of get in there. We have to review the goals that we have set, and of course monitor and adjust. I put here the plan, do, check, act initiatives or kind of approach, because we always need to make sure that we come back and we make sure that this is fixed or that is not causing other problems internally. So plan, do, check, act. I'm sure most of you know what I'm talking about. This you might have seen before. I've talked about this. I don't know if you've seen that before, but it's about people, purpose, planet, and profit, and how we can be guest and talent. Of course, we need to understand that our priorities are our guests, our employees or workforce, and how do we design everything I said before with this perspective. Having the purpose, as I said before, is important beyond unique selling points or any USPs we have as a business. We need to have this higher purpose. And it's just, we can't still be selling fancy beds. So we need to stand for something else, especially in the luxury industry. Also planet. So how do we mitigate those impacts, and how we can create kind of sustainable procurement procedures internally in our businesses. It doesn't matter if you're not a hotel chain. You still have you still will need these purchases. So the sustainable procurement should be in place, so we can guarantee transparency. That is my last point. So of course we want to make profit, but when we are doing these investment decisions, we need to assess the environmental and social risks of every investment we make, so we get the most for every asset. So how do we maintain industry growth with limited resources? That was another question that we raised many times, and I was about to show you, but I'll show you in a second. So there are some kind of academic institutions and research scientific papers talking about degrowth, or talking about how can we keep this growth, but with the limited resources we've got. And here in this image, you can see the main points where we need to find that balance. So of course, travel industry and the business needs we need human resources, transportation, government support, regulation entities for license, food consumption, that is a big issue. The food waste is a big issue here. Water usage, of course, we've seen one of the main social sustainability megaforces is water scarcity. So how can we deal with that? International suppliers. So we've seen in this crisis how dependent we are in certain areas. So how we can be less dependent in a way. How we depend as an industry of global stability, global suppliers, as I said, and energy. So how do we keep that balance with natural resources and the best practices that we can have? I mentioned here a few. Of course, we could add more, but here are some of the main ones that we could be taking on our daily basis. So from energy, from renewable sources, of course, our operations. So we need to map our operations, where our offices, where are we based, what are our suppliers based. Yes, we need to kind of map all of that and ensure that our operations emit no greenhouse gases, that our products or services emit no greenhouse gases, how the water is used in an environmental and sustainable way. Of course, that all the materials derive from sources that respect welfare, ecosystems, people, animals. Operational emissions do not harm people or the environment. Especially for when we have offices or properties that are in the city center. So how do we analyze that? Operational byproducts are repurposed. Operationals are not encroachment for systems or communities. So all of this, of course, food waste and policies and training. This is a big issue of food waste, and we've seen that happening not only in resorts, but also in kind of more urban hotels. So food waste policies in place and training. I would never, it would never be enough. We really need to have more educational programs around that. So as I said before, there are few considerations from the academic world. So are we confronting natural resources and business as usual? And how can we decouple degradation of our environment and economic prosperity, I would say. So there is here, I put here the source, so you can go and read the full paper. It's down on the corner on the right, and here is presented. So the biophysical limits to tourism growth, and how can we kind of investigate and prepare to change the way the business as usual, and putting a price. This is important, putting a price on all the natural resources we are using for our business operations. And secondly, tourism degrowth as de-touristification. So we have, of course, some certain areas that we want to potential or we want to promote, but there are some others that we'd like to consider kind of using a different approach for kind of selling or destination management companies or strategies have been for a long period, for a long time, about selling destinations, but there are some of them in certain destinations that we could have a different approach in a more educational way rather than just in a marketing sales approach. So we need to drive traffic, we need to drive consumers or visitors, yes, but we need to have kind of this discussion of what we need to do now. So what is our destination? What point is the destination? Is it crescendo? Is it decreasing? So we really need to have that in mind, so we don't put more pressure in land, in wildlife, in natural resources, in local communities. So I don't know how are we with time. Okay, I'm going to talk for three, I would say 13 minutes more, and then I'll let you ask me anything you have, any questions you have. So please make sure you prepare for later on. So I'd like to say when I was thinking about the masterclass, like what are the 6 stops in our sustainability journey that we have to do as business owners or as employees in companies, or what we need to think about. And on the first place, I was thinking about promoting a sound governance or internal governance. Of course, we need to assess leadership and management processes that we've seen, ethics and culture, as I said on my first slide. What are we doing internally? What is our culture? Is our culture supporting all this movement internally? Because it's not about donating hours to NGOs. Here we are talking about transformational programs that we need to incorporate in our businesses that allow us to have cultures that thrive over time, and they are based on code of ethics that we could have and other cultural frameworks that we have in place. So it's key to have internal culture that allow us to kind of make sure that those initiatives are happening. Thirdly is more about the policy engagement. So in the first place, what policies we can create or we can have in place before we have laws. So for instance, for gender equality, for equal pay, what policies could we have internally already before in our state or in our country or in our city we have more laws or more, I would say more law frameworks that are affecting or are obligating us to doing or kind of pushing us to do it or forcing us to do it. So how do we prepare in advance? So how can we prepare as a business our policies and prepare our scenarios before laws are pushing us to do it in a rush or without people being really in that mindset? Second, goes first. Of course, we want to engage with our customers. Here it says retail. For us, he will be all the tourists from all the buying scenarios. So from they are starting to consider to travel, where are they looking, what the properties they travel, what transportation they are using. So we need to analyze and engage with them in all the different and all the different, I don't know how to say, steps at the end, no? All the different steps. And lastly, the fair and transparent marketing and advertising. As I said before, here we really need to improve how we present the destinations and what areas we want to keep pushing and what areas we want to educate consumers about. So I'm sure that if we educate them in a way that they understand we have a problematic in a specific destination, consumer understands that they can choose another destination or they can go in another time during the years. Instead of summer, they could go during the winter time or fall. And lastly, employees. The third point is employees. So of course, we need to ensure that if we follow this sustainability journey, it will help us with talent acquisition and, of course, development of those talents, so having better innovative capabilities, for instance, compensation and benefits for our employees. So, of course, we need to make sure that we are paying minimum wage so people can live on at least, and we need to have equal pay and having a diverse and inclusive culture. So we need to have different ethnicities, different sex orientation. We need to have a diverse workplace so everyone can see related to the workplace, and we can have richer ideas, and we can have, of course, more opportunity to grow. And this is still a pending assignment for us because we have less than 28% women leaders worldwide in our industry. And of course, this is something we have to change. And this is one of the Sustainable Development Goals, the number 5, that we still have to tackle in the industry. Then the number 4 is supporting communities, as I said before. So how do we use the investment in a philanthropic capital to expand economic growth locally and, of course, opportunities locally? Yeah. Positive impact investing. Here we will be talking about environmental, social, and governance, risk assessment, and also understanding with investors the importance of allocating cash to kind of the problems that we have, and use them to create new opportunities at the end of the day, and financing solutions that generate positive impact and social impacts. And of course, partnership with organizations that help us to advance in sustainable development. And last but not least, managing operating footprint. So as I said before, all the steps in my recommendations that we could be following, they will be in this category. So it's a lot. It's a lot to I'm talking a lot, and I would love to have your feedback and know what you're thinking and your questions. I'll go in shortly and answer them. So we have like the main sustainability aspects. We most of the time related to climate change, environmental issues, natural issues, but we really need to have a broader idea that when we talk about sustainability, we're talking about our industry dependent on many resources, not just the natural resources. Yes. So we have risk assessment that we have to do in terms of quality, reliability, sustainability specifics, and standards that we really need to have within our companies. Supply chains, as I said before, is key to have supply chains that are or have we have kind of a bi-directional conversation. So we are listening to the problems in an active way. We are listening to their problems. We are addressing their problems, and we are giving solutions to that. And we kind of have foster that relationship. So improve conditions in communities where we operate. So for instance, we can have tour operator. Okay, I haven't talked about tour operators for the whole presentation. So we can have a tour operator that has a certification, Travel Life or any certification, that tell us that all the hotels that are working with that tour operator are certified, for instance, with GSTC or Green Key, or they are doing or addressing sustainability in an active way. And also that tour operator sells destinations that are not massified, or that they have blue flag beaches, for instance. So this is some of the examples. Of course, dealing fairly with suppliers. So we want to have suppliers in a relationship that ensures that fairness. And of course, we are doing business ethically. And here we can have, of course, the code of business ethics. We can have a supplier procurement kind of protocols in place. We can have a minimum. For instance, we will do business only with you if you kind of have B Corp certification, for instance. That could be examples. Then stakeholders. So of course we need to consider supply chain is important, but we also need to understand consumer needs and what's happening currently in demand side. Shareholders, of course, are important. So stakeholder over shareholder, but even though shareholder supremacy is not anymore in our, I would say, priority list, but of course they are important, and we need to understand how important is investment for these initiatives, but as well how they understand that we are doing the right thing and that will impact in our bottom line. And of course this will put us in a better I would say reputational scenario, and we can lose, for instance, license of operate if we don't implement some of these initiatives. So it's key that this is in a priority. Communities, as I said before, is important. We keep communication with our communities, with civil society, and of course with non-governmental organizations. And workforce, of course, learning and development, international labor organization rights, equal pay, learning and development. They are just some of the main areas we have to start tackling before we consider going into other areas. So how do we identify our stakeholders to start building that relationship that strengthens our reputation and help us kind of to build momentum and kind of develop the initiatives I said. So shareholders, investors, civil society, I already said about that. Engage with population directly. Engage with population that directly the business actions that we are going to take will impact. So what is the action plan here? So the action plan should be comprehensive, should be coordinated and consistent. Comprehensive because it needs to have all the different areas that I already mentioned before. Coordinated because it should be internally and externally well coordinated, internally with the different HODs or departments, and externally with private and public institutions, and consistent because we can't do one thing today and different tomorrow because that will kill our reputation. So we have to be consistent. We have to be consistent with our message, with our mindset, with our goals. Yeah. And last but not least as well, initiative so how we actually embed all these tactics and who will be internally responsible for that. So head of sustainability, HR director, CSR, procurement, operations managers, COO, CFOs, etc. I'm going to go for the CFO part because of course it's the money is important to have that money mindset. I'll talk about the CFO. So when presenting the chief financial officer, so when we are presenting all our initiatives or strategy or tactics that we want to have, we want to present for reputational, I would say, benefits. So of course we can maintain license to operate because for some of these actions, depending where we based globally, is a risk if we don't do them because we can lose our license to operate. We want to avoid any negative publicity, lawsuits, anything related to that, and our trust and reputation with distributors and partners as well. We want to use technology as much as we can. So for instance, for supply chain transparency, we can use blockchain, which is a technology used for that. Stakeholders, we want to improve the relationships and we want to enable business enabling environment, of course. So we want to have some incentives and kind of having this, as I said before, private-public good relationship and open relationship. And lastly, we want to make an impact. So we want to optimize our human resource management. We want to strengthen the value chains. And of course, we want to ensure stability and transparency within the supply chains. So CFO, why is the CFO important? Because money matters. And we really need to get all the initiatives that are in our finance departments to kind of assess the environmental, social, and governance impact of them. So the professional accounting strongly recommends that environmental, social, and governance are really taken into consideration when making resource allocation in businesses. Yeah. So the CFO CAPEX criteria that we will have for 21st century, of course, for our 2020 goals, if we make now one of these initiatives, is mitigating risks. Of course, the risk of doing the project, we need to assess. So what are the risks of doing this project, and what are the risks of not doing the project? This is important, and this links with the scenario planning. Yeah. And I'm going to finish quickly so I can get to all the questions. Revenue growth, employee expenses savings. So if we can save, turnover, for instance, that is very much a big issue in our industry, how that can impact our bottom line, or how we can increase, savings in that I would say area. Asset and market value. So of course, our asset will have a higher value in the market if we do these initiatives. Enhance reputation, as I said before. What are the operational business needs that we really need to consider, and how we will progress on environmental, social, and governance, or the sustainable development goals if we do this project. And I did an activity, but I don't know if we can go to questions before I do the activity. If you have any sort of, I don't know, thing that you want me to clarify, or if you have specific questions, please let me know. And then this I'm going to leave that for you as well. This is an activity of thinking how you can start doing that, and the key components of an SDG sector roadmap. This is from the World Business Council of Sustainable Development that I showed you in the first place, their logo. They are suggesting questions that you can, when you're doing all these actions, what questions can you ask to yourself? So in the first place, is this a short, medium, or long-term action? Will this action have a low, medium, or high level on the SDG impact? What level of sector effort is required to implement and realize this action? What types of partnerships are we required to make this action have an impact? In what regions could this action have the greatest impact? So these are questions that you can ask yourself before starting these initiatives. And I put it as an activity for you to reflect the different, I don't know what are your specific business model, but you can reflect and identify what are the areas that you might want to start, changing or improving within your business. And I'm going to see if we have any question. I put this nice quote here. This from Martin Luther King. The time is always right to do the right thing, of course. And here's my contact. If any of you want to email me or be in contact, and also I think we'll have more master classes with women in hospitality and travel tech. So if any of you want to join us, this is the European Sustainable Hospitality Club is my own business where I'm the founding partner, but I'm also collaborating with the Women in Hospitality and Travel Tech group. So please feel free to join us within the LinkedIn group or in any upcoming master classes. And I'm going to see if we have questions. Let me see. I think it was either it was very clear or no one wants to really ask anything about that. I'm not sure if I can see if there is anything I'm not seeing because of the presentation, but I hope that if you have questions, you can also email it to or answer the questions in the LinkedIn group, or you can send us here here is my email, so you can email me, or of course contact the Women in Hospitality and Travel Tech group, so I can reply to them. And I would like to finalize the activity or the masterclass. Okay, we have one question. How can we minimize for risk new projects? Okay, so the question is from Turan. How can we minimize for risk? Okay, so how I understand, if I understand well, is how you can minimize the risk of doing a new project. So here it depends on what business area we're talking about. Would be nice to know your business model, so I can kind of say more specifically, or I can answer in a more specific way. But here, if we want to minimize risks, we really need to have to consider the enterprise risk management assessment. We really need to have an assessment of current resources that we have available, current resources in terms of capital, resources in terms of human resources that we have, and how this will affect communities, how that will affect so all the stakeholders, how that if we're doing this initiative, how this initiative will affect in a negative way. Of course, we need to have all the negative impacts and all the positive impacts. Now, if the negative impacts of doing the activity are greater, or of course we are seeing that this is not a benefit because it's going to affect directly or indirectly to any of our business stakeholders, we are not doing the initiative. Now, if we want to reduce risk, also we need to know the timing. Is that the right timing to do it? Is a big question to do, especially in our industry. Is that the right timing? And if it's the right timing, if we are not affecting directly or indirectly any of our business stakeholders in a negative way, in all the categories I mentioned before, if we have the right resources, whether it's capital resources or human resources, and it's not going to is also improving. So it's not just the risk. So it's going to actually even uplift all the potential benefits. Of course, we are doing the initiative. Now, why is important that we assess if we are not doing a project, what are the risks of not doing an initiative or the risk of not doing a project? So here is important. And why is important? Because if we don't, for instance, take an initiative about land, or about natural resource management, or about how are we sourcing our food, for instance, or seafood, the way we provide our own about seafood, that could have an impact. That could have a negative impact, because that could have a negative impact in reputation, also in resource management, also in terms of local communities, in terms of certification. So there is a lot of risks involved in that one only initiative. So it's important, as I said, to analyze the negative, so the risks of not doing the project, and of course the risk of not doing the project, so doing it and not doing it, and the enterprise risk management assessment as well, likelihood, the likelihood of impact, and the likelihood of happening, and the impact that it will have, or it could have in our business. I hope I answered. I don't know, Turan, if I answer. If we have anything else, we have 1 minute before we finalize. I don't know if we have any other questions. I'm gonna have 1 more minute in case someone else wants to ask something else. Okay, so we don't have any more questions at the moment. It's 1 o'clock. It's been a pleasure. As I said, this is my email. You can contact us in the Women in Hospitality and Travel Tech LinkedIn group. Please join us. We will have more masterclass in the upcoming weeks. And I hope you stay healthy and safe, and we'll see each other in an upcoming masterclasses and courses. Thank you.